Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the terrible murder of 35-year-old Kendra Hatcher. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both Bratterstein, but no pressure. Now, on a real quick note, if you have been here before, I'm sure you have noticed this sick new shirt. Well, in honor of today being Valentine's Day, my husband designed this new logo for a new shirt that's launching today. It's going to be in black and white permanently on the merch store, and the color pink is going to be running through the end of February, just as like a Valentine's Day exclusive. So if you wanted the pink one, it is limited edition. Those horrible words that we hate to hear. Limited edition, but it is because, I mean, pink Valentine's Day, just something special. But if you are interested, the link will be down below as always. Black and white will be there permanently, and then you can get the pink one whilst it is still available. It is my personal favorite. I love the pink one. I'm really happy that this is the sample one that I picked up because I have to buy my shirts too. And I'm obsessed with the pink one, but that's just me. So now that I'm done saying all the things, we can get into this case. Now, this is a case that, like, blew my mind. I don't even know exactly how I landed on this. I was researching another case. This has been happening to me a lot recently, but I was researching a totally different case, and then I started doing the click around thing, article to article to article, and I got smacked in the face with Kendra's case. And once I started looking into it, the more I looked into it, I was like, what the fuck? There's just so much to it. It's such an intense case with so many twists and turns. You're just sitting there like, and then what happened? With who? You did what? With who? No. There's just a lot of twists and turns. And when you first learn about the case and when police first arrived at the scene, it appeared to just be like the tragic tale of a robbery gone wrong. But as they dug deeper into the story and into Kendra and into her life and into those around her, they found that what it really was a twisted tale of obsession that led to a hired hit being put out on an innocent woman. So yeah, today I'm going to tell you that whole story, and I think it's time that I just do that. I stop talking about it and start being about it and start picking up what I'm putting down. So come, gather around and let me tell you the story of the tragic murder of Kendra Hatcher. On September 2nd, 2015 in Dallas, Texas, just one day before a planned trip to Cancun with her new boyfriend for the Labor Day weekend, a young woman was gunned down in the parking garage of her apartment building, the Gables Park 17 apartments, in what appeared, at first at least, to be a robbery gone wrong. She was found on the ground, lying face up, and her purse was missing. But upon further investigation, it was found that she had been shot at close range in the head from an overhead angle with her hands behind her head, execution style. So, not a super common way for somebody to be killed in a run-of-the-mill robbery. They thought it looked more like a professional mob hit, or even an execution. At the exact same moment that this was taking place, a 16-year-old kid who also lived in the building, a boy named Hashim, was riding down the elevator with a friend of his when all of a sudden he heard the unmistakable sounds of a woman screaming, gunshots, car doors closing, tires screeching, and then silence. When he followed the sounds, he stumbled upon a woman dead on the ground wearing only scrubs. Hashim and his friend then looked up to see a black Jeep Cherokee gunning it, going as fast as it could out of the parking garage. He couldn't see through the windows what these people looked like exactly. They had masks on and they pulled the masks off just right before they hit the street. But from what he could tell through the dark tinted windows is that there were two individuals in the car and that he believed one of them was a white male. When police arrived on the scene, the woman was found on the first level of the parking garage, and immediately officers found this odd, just simply because the parking garage was a gated parking garage. You couldn't just get in there. You needed to have either a keypad or a clicker. Like, it wasn't a public garage. So for somebody to get in, they would have had to have had access. So it kind of ruled out somebody random being involved. As officers approached the woman on the ground, they found that her car door was still open, and it looked like she had literally just gotten out of her car. She hadn't even had a chance to do anything. She got out and was immediately executed. So it all happened very quickly. And on the ground next to her was a discarded magazine from the murder weapon. When police ran the license plate on the car, that's when they first learned the identity of the victim. They learned that this was a 35-year-old pediatric dentist named Kendra Hatcher. So now they had the task of figuring out who was Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was one of 5 children born into a big, close-knit family to parents Reagan and Bonnie, and the family lived in a small town called Pleasant Plains, Illinois. She went to a small farm school and was very gifted academically. Her brother Neil said that she was always studying. Despite that, though, she still made time for extracurricular activities, like being the captain of the cheerleading team, being on the volleyball team, and doing church missions, going to different countries to help perform dental work for the poor. She had even interned at a practice that helped poor children in Kentucky. So kids were a big part of her life through her whole life. She was always really interested in working with and helping children. One of her dental school classmates said of her, and I quote, "She was the most generous, giving friend. You could call her at 3 a.m. and she would answer without any hesitation. Her laugh was contagious, high-pitched, and full of joy." Her brother Neil also said of her, and I quote, "She was on a different level when it came to being awesome." Kendra was just a well-liked and popular girl. She was a respected and looked up to woman who made it her mission in life to helping children, both in her career and in her off time. She was an incredibly happy person with an infectious smile and laugh. You couldn't be in the same room with her and not smile. She was also physically beautiful with perfect teeth, high cheekbones, black hair, and green eyes. So the literal ideal for so many people. Kendra was incredibly loved, especially by her family, and of her family, especially by her nieces and nephews. They called her Aunt KK. And one of her nieces had even been at her house fairly recently before the murder took place, and she had been just staying there for a little while having a visit. And the two had had a ton of fun. They spent a bunch of time by the pool. They got their nails done. They just had a lot of quality time. And this niece even got to meet Kendra's new boyfriend, 38-year-old Ricky. She said Ricky was a really nice guy. He was a quiet guy, but friendly, that him and Kendra were very, very affectionate, very cuddly, very in love. And when he would be over while the niece was there, they would all watch movies together at night, and Ricky and Kendra would cuddle up on the couch and have no issue with PDA. Not like inappropriate PDA, but very cuddly, very kissy, very clearly feeling each other, liking each other, loving each other. Kendra and Ricky had met online only 4 months prior to her murder, and the date actually almost didn't happen because Kendra had had so many shitty online dates previously, but a friend of hers had convinced her to go, and in the end, she was glad that she had. Both Kendra and Ricky had been previously married, so the stakes felt a little higher dating now than maybe they would have at another point in their lives. The date had went well, and apparently Ricky had ordered chocolate chip pancakes for dinner, and this is something that Kendra found to be pretty funny, like that an adult man would order chocolate chip pancakes, but like, honestly, same. I would have done that, and I would have been attracted to a man who did that, yeah. From there, the relationship moved very quickly. I mean, they had just met 4 months prior, and Kendra was already thinking of giving up her life in Dallas and moving with Ricky to California because he had had a job offer. So they were pretty serious. They were even talking about marriage. They were already planning to start a wedding fund, even though they had just met and started dating. They were just super obsessed with each other. Ricky said that they just clicked, that they saw eye to eye on everything, that they were so into each other, that they met in the middle when it came to spiritual standpoints, professional standpoints, just everything about them just was a good fit. It just happened very quickly. During the 4 months that Kendra and Ricky were dating, she had actually written him a note, and I'm going to read the quote from that note now that illustrates how she felt about him. And that was, and I quote, "And then my soul saw you, and it kind of went, oh, there you are. I've been looking for you." So now, back to the day of the actual murder. Police start looking into Kendra now that they know her name, and this is when they learn that she has a very, very recent new boyfriend, a 38-year-old man named Ricardo. Ricky Pantagua, who was a dermatologist and white. And you remember the kid that lived in the building said he saw a white man fleeing the scene. Well, you already knew about Ricky. Now the police knew about him too. So naturally, police wanted to speak to Ricky, and they were in the process of trying to locate him when he actually kind of came to them a little bit. So what happened was, it turns out Ricky had already been at Kendra's apartment at the Gable 17 apartment complex. He had been waiting inside her unit for her to get home from work because they had plans to hang out. He had been waiting. He had gotten hungry, so he had actually left the apartment right before the murder took place. Okay. He went, he got some tacos, he came back, he tried to get into the building, and he was stopped where he met police, and they were like, oh, we would very much like to speak with you, guy. When police told Ricky what had happened to Kendra, he did seem genuinely shocked and distraught and hysterical. But regardless of that, police weren't really ready to write him off just yet because his story just seemed a little suspect, you know, that he just happened to be there, that he just happened to leave right before the murders, and that he just happened to come back right after the murders, and he was a white guy, and he was her love interest. They were like, we're not sure that we trust you, right? So then they move on, and they start talking to Kendra's family, to Kendra's friends, trying to see if there's anyone that anyone knew who may want to hurt her, but they came up with no leads because this woman was just universally loved by everyone who knew her. And meanwhile, while all of that is happening, police are also working with the apartment complex to try to get the camera footage, because there were cameras, like common area cameras, inside of the parking garage, to see if that could lead them to any more specific leads. To illustrate just how loved Kendra was, her coworkers ended up gathering outside of one of the entrances to the parking garage one of the evenings after her death to sort of have like a vigil for her. They held flowers and candles and posters with her face on them, and they told reporters that she was just a kind and wonderful person with a smile on her face permanently, and they could not imagine who would want to kill her. It was Kendra's sister who ended up having to call their mother and let her know what had happened, and apparently during that phone call, her sister called, and all she said was, "Mom, it's Kendra." And immediately by her tone, she could tell that something had happened, and her mom started to cry right away. And that's when her sister told her that Kendra had been murdered, that she had been shot. And her mom just like lost it and ran out into the front yard and was like, no, not my Kendra, and just started screaming. So during the investigation, police were able to get the footage from the parking garage, which was helpful for them. As they watched it, they did see that a black Jeep Cherokee was entering the apartment building at about 7:45 p.m., which is perfectly in line with what Hashim had said that he had seen. But where Hashim had only seen through the window and was only able to see one of the two people driving, police were able to get a better look at the people actually in the vehicle, and they saw the second person, and they realized that the person driving was a woman. From this footage, they were also able to see how the Jeep actually gained access to the parking garage, because remember I said it was like a gated community, so you would kind of need like to live there or to know somebody who lived there to have access. Well, what they saw is that the Jeep had actually been waiting outside the parking garage and waited until somebody who lived there had gone in, like used their clicker and went in to enter, and then they just followed behind them. Okay, so that opened up the possibility of it being somebody random because they didn't necessarily need a gate clicker to get in. On this video, they were also able to actually see the murder. It was very grainy. You couldn't see who the people were, but you see a black silhouette get out of the Jeep, go over, shoot Kendra, and then run back to the Jeep as the Jeep pulls out of a parking space. So quickly in the investigation, Dallas police realized that they were going to need help from the public to try to identify who the people in the Jeep were, who owned this Jeep. Some sort of clue to tie this Jeep to a person, because as they looked into Kendra and they looked into her life, it was producing no leads. This woman was just genuinely loved. There was no one who had anything bad to say, no one who knew her drove a Jeep. So the police actually held a press conference. During this press conference, they produced still images that were captured from the surveillance tapes, telling the public, like, hey, if you know whose car this is or who was driving it this day, please holla at your boy, because we don't know who this is. Which this does seem like a long shot, right? Like, it's a Jeep Cherokee. It's not a super unique car or anything. But somehow, this lead is helpful. And a man calls in, a man named Luis Ortiz. And he says, not only does he recognize the Jeep, but he believes that the Jeep belongs to him. Police bring Luis in for questioning, and immediately they are suspicious of him, obviously, because he's saying that he might own the car that was driving the murderer of Kendra Hatcher. So they look into him and they find that he is a mechanic and that he has no connection to Kendra whatsoever. And in his own words, he had no reason to hurt her. He didn't even know her. And on top of that, he actually did have an alibi for the time of the murder. He had been across town getting dinner with a friend. So they were like, okay, guy, if you didn't do it, how can you explain that your vehicle was at a murder scene if you weren't the one driving the vehicle? That is when Luis tells police that he had actually loaned his car to a friend, a 31-year-old woman named Brenda Delgado. Apparently what happened was, as I said, Luis was a mechanic. Brenda, who's a friend of his, was having issues with her car, brought it in to be serviced and was going to need a car in the meantime to drive whilst her car was being serviced. So he had loaned her his Jeep to drive while her car was being fixed. So that would make you think, okay, this Brenda woman, we want to talk to her. Here's the problem with that. Luis then tells them, but here's the thing, it couldn't be her either because I was having dinner with her across town. You know how he had an alibi that he was across town eating dinner? Well, he was eating dinner with Brenda Delgado, who was supposed to be in possession of his car. I know that that's confusing. This case has a lot of twists and turns and a lot of people. So maybe jot it down. So far we got Luis, we got Brenda, we got Ricky. All people you might want to remember. Or maybe you don't. I don't want to give anything away. So at that point, police, they put a pin in Luis. They by no means take him off the murder board. They just take him, put him over here, put a red piece of string. We'll deal with him later. And they decide they're going to now turn their focus to Brenda Delgado because obviously they need to speak to her now. They call her, ring, Brenda. Would you please come down for questioning? No problem. On my way. So she comes down for questioning. And they're like, listen, this is what Luis said. Your car was broken. He loaned you his Jeep. The Jeep was used in a murder, ... And she's like, I don't know what the fuck this guy's talking about. He must be having me confused with somebody else. 1, I was having dinner with him. 2, I wasn't using his Jeep. I think he's confusing me with our mutual friend, Crystal Cortez. Now, when I read that, I found it odd because I feel like if you loaned your car to someone, you may remember who you loaned the car to, especially since you know these people. You know Brenda, that's your friend that you're close enough with to have dinner. But this is what Brenda says. Brenda tells police that her and Crystal are newer friends, that they'd only known each other about a month at this point, but that Crystal was kind of going through a rough patch in life. She was a single mother. She didn't have a lot of money, where Brenda was more successful in her life. So Brenda was kind of being there as like a friend, shoulder to cry on, a mentor, somebody to help her through these dark times, or so Crystal thought. So the police are like, okay, Brenda, can you please call your friend Crystal and ask her if she'll come down for questioning? Because we'd really like to speak to her now too. So she does that. Now Crystal comes down. So now they have all 3 of these people in the police station at the same time. They got Luis in one room, they got Brenda in one room, and now they've got Crystal in another room. So at this point, Luis and Brenda are just kind of chilling. Like they're in their rooms kind of waiting to see what happens with Crystal because they already have an alibi. They were together at dinner at the time of the murder. The only thing that was differing in their story was who had been loaned the Jeep. And when police were speaking to Crystal, they were finding that Crystal's story was lining more up with Brenda's. That Crystal said herself that the Jeep had been loaned to her and that the night of the murders, she was the one driving it, that she had been driving around with her 6-year-old son when something crazy had happened. This is what she told police. She said that she was out driving with her son when she thought to herself, you know, I'd really like to take this adorable sweet boy to the park. So they get over to the park and they realize that there's no street parking. There's nowhere for her to park. So knowing that this apartment building was nearby, she goes over, she waits, she sees somebody go in and she's like, free parking, hell yeah. Living in LA, I get that life. So she follows that car in, and while she's in there, all of a sudden, she hears gunshots, followed by a man running in front of her Jeep with a gun in one hand and a purse in the other. And that she then tried to speed away. Right away, police are like, hold that fucking thought. We know that story's not true, because we can see on camera that the person who shot Kendra jumped out of your vehicle. Okay, they jumped out of the Jeep. So can you maybe, I don't know, explain that? Because that doesn't make sense with your story. And that's when she changed her story completely. She said that she hadn't told the truth before because she was scared for her life, but now I swear, I'm telling the truth. I'll take a polygraph, anything you want. This is the truth. So she says she was out driving around with her son when a man carjacked her, made her let him in the car, ordered her to drive him to this apartment complex, ordered her to drive to the back of the parking garage. He then jumped out of the car, committed the murder, bing, bang, boom, jumped back in the car, and made her drive him for a couple of blocks away from the building before jumping out of the car and fleeing out into the evening, never to be seen or heard from again. Police didn't really buy her story. She had already painted herself with her first lie as an uncredible liar, right? So they asked her, like, okay, why didn't you come forward sooner? And she was like, well, I hadn't seen anything on the news. And they're like, okay, but you know somebody was shot. You were there. And that's when she continued that she was just scared for her life and worried for the life of her son and didn't want anything to happen to her as well. So they kept her there and they questioned her at length, but still they weren't getting any information out of her. She just kept saying that this man was a stranger to her. She'd never met him before. She hadn't seen him since. But they just weren't really believing her story, so they kept pressing her and kept pressing her and kept pressing her. And that's when she changed her story again, and she changed it in a big, big ass way. Now, she wasn't carjacked. Her son wasn't even there that day. She was actually a willing participant in a robbery gone wrong. She said that her and a male friend had gone to this apartment complex because they were planning to rob a woman, that they came upon Kendra, that they went to simply rob her. They just wanted to steal her designer bag. And that Kendra just fought back and fought back, so her partner killed her. That was never the plan, but things just went horribly, horribly wrong. At this point, police were like, that story is also unbelievable, but we at least have you admitting to being part of the actual crime. So now, slap the cuffs on. Cuffs? Slap the cuffs on. Bitch, you're arrested for murder. And they arrested her. So now, police are very interested in finding her male friend who was with her at the time of the robbery, who presumably pulled the trigger. So they ask her, like, hey, can you tell us anything about him? She's like, oh, he was a tall, skinny black man with dreadlocks. Not at all what the teenager in the parking garage had seen, but okay, sure. Anything else? Oh, his name's Lamar. How do you know him? Where did you meet him? How long have you known him? Do you have any information on him? I got nothing. I literally have nothing. I know he drives a blue Sebring. I have his phone number. I can give you that. But that's literally it. And they're like, okay, can you sit with an artist to come up with a composite sketch so that maybe we can have an idea what this guy looks like? And she was like, absolutely, I can, and sat down and did that. At this point, local police are like, okay, we're going to need a little bit of backup. So they actually reach out to the FBI and see if the FBI would be willing to work with them and help trace this phone number and see what they could find. So they do. FBI traces the phone number to an apartment, and the police drive over to this apartment, and they're surprised to see a blue Chrysler Sebring sitting in the parking lot. So they're like, okay, we're definitely in the right spot. So they sit on it, and they sit on it, and they wait on it, and they wait until finally a man who matched the description that Crystal had given to police came out and walked towards the car. So police quickly roll up on him, and they're like, hey, this your car? You going somewhere? How about instead of that, you come with us, and we will question you about your involvement in a murder. And he was like, absolutely, I will. He was cool as a cucumber, and he got in the car and he went with them. So now, police are sitting across from the man that they believe could be responsible for shooting Kendra. And this man's name was Christopher Love. Not Lamar, like Crystal had said. His name was Christopher Love. And he was keeping his cool. They questioned him at length, and he denied everything. He denied knowing Crystal. He denied being involved with the murder. He just denied. And while they were questioning him, they actually had his car at the police impound lot. They had brought it in. They searched the car. They searched his apartment, and they found nothing useful. They didn't find the gun. They found nothing. So they were like, we literally have nothing on this guy. Now, this is when something really cool happens. So it really seems like with this case, so many puzzle pieces just fit together so perfectly for them to actually solve this murder. It's amazing. It's really cool to see. So at the same time, they have Christopher Love in the interrogation room speaking with police. There is another guy, like a detective with a drug sniffing dog. Like the guy's name is, I don't know, but I know that the dog's name was Titan because I I take note of the important things. And Titan and Titan's dad had been at the impound lot, and they were doing a demonstration to show what Titan could do. Titan was able to sniff the items that would make like a bomb and also gunpowder. So he does his demonstration. Titan finds what he needs to find. They're all amazed. They're like, oh my God, this dog is amazing. Titan is clearly the goodest of all the boys. So once this guy had finished his demonstration with Titan, the investigators that were working on Kendra's case came up to him and they were like, hey, before you leave, I know you're not normally here, so we have this warrant to search this car, right? We're looking for a gun. They let him know what they're looking for. They let him know the whole case. And they're like, would you mind just letting Titan go on over, do his little thing, and just confirm that we didn't miss anything? And the guy's like, sure, no problem. So he takes Titan over to the car. Titan does his thing. He does his sniffing, and all of a sudden he sits down, letting his dad know that he has found something. Once he's done with that, the guy, they don't search the car immediately. Well, they kind of do, but the guy's not going to wait around for the search to finish. He's got some stuff to do. Titan's got other important work that needs to be done that day. So they're on their way out. As they're leaving, the people start searching the car. The investigators start searching the car in the area that Titan had indicated, which was down near the ashtray area, so real low in the car. And all of a sudden, Titan and his dad are walking. When they hear a guy running up behind him, they turn and the guy's like, we just wanted to let you know. Titan was right. We found a gun. So what had happened was they started digging deep down under the dashboard in an area that they hadn't searched before, and that's when they came across a gun that they had missed in their first search. It was a .40 caliber semi-automatic handgun, and later it would be determined that this gun was the one used to murder Kendra. So police bring in this gun, and they show it to Christopher Love, and are like, so, guess what? We found this hidden in your car, bud. Have you ever seen it before? And he was like, yeah, actually, yes, I have seen that gun. And actually, that's Crystal's gun. The woman who just a moment ago, he claimed he didn't know at all. And he's like, and actually, I didn't shoot the gun. I have the gun because I'm holding the gun, but Crystal's the one who shot the gun. Crystal's the one who committed the murder. And they were like, cool story, bro. Slap the cuffs on him as well. Cuffs? Did I say it again? Slap the cuffs on him as well. And he too was arrested for Kendra's murder. So now we have Crystal Cortez arrested for Kendra's murder, and we have Christopher Love arrested for Kendra's murder. So at this point, they had let Brenda and Luis go because they have these two people in custody. But as police look into the backgrounds of both Crystal and Christopher, they start to think that there's a good chance that these people didn't look alone. Neither of them had any connection to Kendra, and this looked like a very deliberate, planned, specific hit on Kendra Hatcher. So it would need to be somebody who knew her. So they were now thinking that maybe Christopher and Crystal were hired by somebody. So they decide that they want to take a closer look at Kendra's new boyfriend, Ricky. Quiet, sweet, cuddly, affectionate Ricky. Ricky had seemed to be genuinely upset when he found out that Kendra was murdered, but it's always the husband, right? And it wasn't just police that suspected Ricky either. Kendra's brother Neil had actually suspected Ricky from day one and had even called him and sort of threatened him a bit the day that Kendra was killed. Police bring Ricky in to be questioned, and right away, they feel like they might be on the right track. Ricky is, less helpful than they'd hope or expect a grieving boyfriend to be, and he even, refused to give police his cell phone so that they could search it for evidence. Ricky told police that, he wanted to be helpful, but that he believed that he should talk to an attorney and get some legal advice before he spoke to them or gave them any of his electronics, which honestly is the right call. Truly, that's what I always say to everyone. If you are ever arrested for anything, even if you're innocent, especially if you're innocent, get an attorney. It's the smartest thing that you can do, right? Innocent people go to jail all the time. However, it definitely never makes you look good to do that. So it is a double-edged sword. So police told Ricky, that's fine. You want to get your legal advice? Get your legal advice. In the meantime, we're going to get a warrant and we're going to go through all your shit. We're just going to search your whole house. We're going to search your whole life. And he's like, what? Am I a suspect? Am I a suspect? Is that why you're doing this? And they were like, no one said you were a suspect. Well, we don't need you to be a suspect for us to get a warrant to go through your shit. You are connected to this woman. You could have a connection to the murder. We can and will get a warrant and search your shit. And that's when Ricky sort of panicked and he just agreed to give them his cell phone. So now, Ricky's released. He's at home that night and he's sitting there and he's watching TV when the news comes on. When the news comes on, it's talking about Kendra's story, which must be fucking heartbreaking to sit and watch the story of the woman you loved being murdered on the news. As he continues watching, though, he sees the still images from the surveillance camera of the parking garage. And as he watches it and he sees these still images of the people police are looking for, he feels sick to his stomach because someone on this photo looks familiar to him. It actually looks like an ex-girlfriend of his. An ex-girlfriend who he had actually spoken to the day Kendra was murdered. An ex-girlfriend who had offered her condolences and had offered to bring over groceries or anything he may need. So he's like, this is fucking crazy. So he contacts police and he's like, listen, I just saw the news. I have an idea who the woman in the still images is. I think that's my ex-girlfriend, Brenda Delgado. Did you just get chills? Because I just got chills. And I know the story and I just got chills. Now, who was Brenda Delgado? Brenda was the child of parents who had immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico. So when Brenda was a child, her family did the best they could to provide for her and her 4 brothers in Dallas, Texas, but they had little money. Her father worked as a construction worker and her mother worked for the USPS and also cleaned houses. But with 5 kids, it just wasn't a lot of money, so they grew up mostly poor. Because of this, Brenda was determined to make more out of her life in the States, to make her parents proud, to do better than they had, every parent's dream, you know? So she was a really good student. Her teachers loved her, and in school, she even took a part-time job as a florist and a waitress to help out her family. When she was older, she still had this drive to make the best out of herself and her whole situation. So she was actually in school to be a dental hygienist at the time of Kendra's murder. Brenda and Ricky had been pretty serious. They had been together for over 2 years, living together after only 3 months of dating, and he had given her a promise ring. So it kind of seems to me like Ricky is like a fast mover in relationships just in general, but that could just be me. At one point, the two had even become pregnant, but they ended up having an abortion. Brenda was under the impression that she and Ricky were going to get married, so you can imagine how devastating it was when he called the whole thing off. Why he ended it is uncertain, but it devastated Brenda, who was just super in love with him. After the breakup, her grades dropped in school, and she took a few weeks off from her dental hygiene program and just needed some her time because there was a lot going on. The two did end up reconnecting and getting back together for a short while after Brenda randomly showed up at this salsa dancing class that Ricky happened to be taking. What a coinkydink that she found herself there. But the two ran into each other, they started talking, they started dating again. She still kept her own place at that point, but they were like, you know, hanging out, dating. And it didn't last though. He ended up again breaking it off in February of 2015, and from that time on, the two had remained platonic friends. He was like, we can still talk, we text, we're buds. You can stay on my cell phone plan, like we're cool, but we're not dating anymore. And that was already hard for her, obviously, because she still wanted to be with him. But then, just a little while after that, he already had a new girlfriend, Kendra Hatcher. So, that definitely reopened a pre-existing wound for Brenda Delgado. At this point, police really want to try to connect Brenda to this crime, but the problem is she had an alibi. Remember, she was across town having dinner with Luis, and she had even produced a receipt that showed that she was, in fact, there. So, it's just really odd to them, considering she's clearly involved, right? Like, how else would that name just randomly be pulled out of Ricky's ass if she wasn't involved? And on top of that, Luis had said that he loaned the Jeep to Brenda, not Crystal, so it just wasn't adding up right. So they're like, okay, let's try to connect her in another way. So they go to Christopher Love, and they're like, hey, bud, how long have you known Brenda? How do you know Brenda? And he's like, Brenda? Who's Brenda? And he does the whole, I don't know who that is, blah, blah, blah. They go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth before finally he's like, fine, I do know Brenda. Not personally, like we don't know each other well, but we do know each other professionally because we did make a recent business transaction. Christopher Love said that Brenda had hired him to rob Kendra, not kill her, just to steal Kendra's purse. Brenda had told Christopher that she was a, quote, cocaine cowgirl, which is apparently a member of the Mexican drug cartel, and she told him that if he helped her do this, he would get a big payout and be able to be put into contact with people who could further his drug dealing career, which is what his goals were. He was a very goal-oriented guy. He saw something, And he went for it, you know? Police now go back to Brenda with everything they have. They tell her everything Christopher Love said. They tell her everything Ricky said. And they like start questioning her and trying to get under her skin. They're like, so, did it like hurt a lot when he left you? Did it make you feel inadequate? Did it make you wonder what she had that you didn't? Did it make you hate Kendra that he chose her over you? Etc. etc. And Brenda was like sticking to her gun. She's like, listen, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You must have me confused with Crystal. She just keeps throwing this poor girl Crystal right under the bus, just 24/7. Not me, it's Crystal. Not me, it's Crystal. So they go to Crystal. They tell Crystal like, hey, your homegirl, she's throwing you under the bus left and right. We gotta politely let that ambulance go through real quick. She's throwing you under the bus left and right, so you might want to talk. And this is when Crystal gets pissed and she's like, you know what? Yes, I will talk. Loyalty, who is she? And she tells them everything. She admitted to police that, like Christopher Love, Brenda had hired her to take part in murdering Kendra Hatcher. Here's the problem. They have no direct evidence connecting Brenda to the murder. They just have two people with their feet to the fire, quite literally, well, figuratively, that are both in jail for murder, whose testimony and admissions don't hold a lot of weight without proof because these people are trying to get out of a murder charge. So even though police believe Brenda was involved, Ricky believed that Brenda was involved, and two people who were arrested for the murder said that Brenda was involved, they had no proof and they had to let her go. Within a day or two of being released from that interview room, Brenda Delgado was in the wind. She had fled the country. Brenda Delgado was formally indicted for murder 7 weeks after the murder of Kendra Hatcher and was considered to be a fugitive on the run, wanted for capital murder. The news broadcasted the information that Brenda had, in fact, hired Christopher Love to murder Kendra Hatcher. Police did their best to search for Brenda. They talked to her friends, her family, and at first her family was in shock. They didn't believe that Brenda was capable of planning out that sort of crime, or any crime for that matter. Brenda's mother said of this, and I quote, "She's a beautiful and very Christian person. She has the best family values and is not the jealous type at all." Brenda was in the wind, but eventually police did learn from Brenda's father that Brenda had gotten on a bus and had fled to Mexico. But where in Mexico was beyond him because they had a lot of family out there. She could literally be anywhere in the country. So police are searching for her. They are looking everywhere for her. They believe that her family has been wiring her money from the States, so they're kind of following that money. And they're finding that, sir, excuse him, excuse you. Police were finding that they were always just like one step behind Brenda, man. Every time they would show up at a place, it's like she had just been there, but they just kept missing her. So after 7 months of searching for her, but being unsuccessful in finding her, Brenda actually ended up being added to the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, and she was only the 9th woman to ever actually be added to that list, which I found interesting. And with being added to that list, the FBI also released to the public that if you were to see her, don't approach her. Let us know, but don't approach her because she could be armed and dangerous. They considered her as such. But they definitely still wanted people to call in, and they even offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could lead to her capture. In addition to that, police back in Texas were putting some pressure on Brenda's family. They were already in the process of drawing up paperwork to have certain members of her family arrested for aiding and abetting. And her family was working with an attorney to try to figure out their best options. And this attorney was also corresponding with Brenda to try to come up with the terms of her peaceful surrender. So apparently Brenda was planning on coming back on her own. They were going to make a deal that would keep her family out of jail, and she'd come back to Texas, be arrested, and everything would be put with a nice little tight little bow. But police had little faith that Brenda would actually show back up. While this was happening, though, police actually got lucky when a tip came in that seemed promising that Brenda was in a specific place in Mexico. So the police went. They went to the place, and guess what? She was there, and they arrested her. And I guess the attorney who was working on her peaceful surrender was kind of pissed off about this because they were like, we were working on a deal, but they got lucky, they got the tip, they went in and they got her. And I guess when this was happening, Kendra's brother Neil had been on a plane, so he didn't learn about the news until the plane landed. But when the plane landed, he was so overcome with emotion and so happy that an arrest had been made that he just grabbed the person next to him and started to hug this person. I guess it was whatever lady was next to him. either on the plane or at the airport. I can't remember if he was off the plane yet, probably still on the plane. And I really wonder what was going through this woman's head, because I don't know how I would deal with a stranger just like grabbing me and likely sobbing and hugging me. Now, the issue police were running into now that Brenda was arrested is that she was arrested in Mexico. So now they had to work with Mexico. Texas, Mexico had to work together to come to the terms of her being extradited from Mexico back to Texas. Now, Mexico would not send her back to Texas unless the death penalty was taken off the table. Apparently that's a thing, because I think she was a citizen of both Mexico and the U.S., and in that case, they will not have one of their citizens executed on our land, I think. So the prosecution's like, fine, we will take the death penalty off the table. Just send the bitch back so that we can try her. So after 6 months of sitting in a jail in Mexico, she was sent back to Texas to pay for her crimes. So the prosecution's main objective was getting the harshest punishment possible for Christopher Love and Brenda Delgado, because Brenda Delgado was the mastermind, Christopher Love, the triggerman. So they started to kind of push on Crystal, who had the least involvement in the crime, the least serious involvement in the crime. So they go to her and they're like, hey, do you want to make a deal? Because right now, you could die. You could be executed for the part that you took in this murder. So do you want to make a deal where you would testify against both Brenda and Christopher, and in exchange the death penalty would be taken off the table? Is that something you're interested in? And at first she was resistant, so they let her just sit with it. They let it stew with her. She had a 6-year-old son. They let her kind of like think about the fact that she could be executed for this. And eventually she did agree that she would testify against both Brenda and Christopher, and she made this decision just weeks before Christopher's trial was to begin. At Christopher's trial, the prosecutor told the jury that Brenda Delgado had approached Christopher Love and offered him money, drugs, and connections in exchange for murdering Kendra Hatcher. Crystal ended up taking the stand as the prosecution's star witness, and she told the court and the jury what happened that day. Crystal told the jury that, she drove Christopher over to the parking garage that day, that he got out of the car, that she heard Kendra crying out and begging for help as he approached her with the gun. She cried out, no, 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 help me, before hearing the gunshots. It's just messed up. And if Crystal's testimony wasn't bad enough, they also had a recorded jailhouse phone call between Christopher and his girlfriend. I don't know why these people don't realize that all of these phone calls are recorded, but he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone, and she's like, why did you have that gun on you? Why hadn't you gotten rid of it? Why would you still have that? And he was just like, I know I should have, but it's too late now. After 3 hours of deliberation, Christopher Love was found guilty of the murder of Kendra Hatcher, and he was given the death penalty. Christopher's father apologized to Kendra's family during the trial, saying, and I quote, "I'm so sorry to the family back there. I'm so sorry, y'all." Next was Brenda's trial, and hers was going to be a lot more difficult because all of the evidence against her was circumstantial, and she had an alibi for the time of the murder. On top of that, Brenda was a well-liked student, studying to be a dental hygienist with no criminal record, and she barely knew Crystal and Christopher. So to get a jury to believe that she was able to convince these two people that she barely knew to commit a murder for her was gonna be a tough sell. Brenda's trial started in June of 2019, and the prosecution told the jury a tale of obsession. An obsession that Brenda had for her ex-boyfriend, the man she thought she would marry, Ricky, and during the whole trial, she had trouble keeping her eyes off him. He ended up testifying against her at her trial and told the court all about their relationship, about how it was when they were together, about them breaking up, and then after them breaking up, she would always sort of show up at random places that he was, like at his salsa dance class or on his running path, and at the time, he didn't think much of it, but in hindsight, he was thinking a lot of it, and that the two would get back together, but that when they broke up the last time, it was for good, and then he met Kendra. He also told them how the two had stayed friends, though, that they talked often, that she was still on his phone plan, and they even confided in her about, the status of his relationship. It did come out at trial, though, that it wasn't a coincidence that Brenda was showing up at these places that Ricky was, because she had been stalking him for a while. She had been stalking his location on his phone through the Find My iPhone app, because they were on the same phone plan, so she could do that. And she had also been stalking his and Kendra's social media. She had photos of just him and photos of him and Kendra together saved to her phone. And what's really creepy is it came out at trial that she actually had been letting herself in to his apartment whenever he wasn't there to just be in there and learn information and just be a total fucking creep. Things came to a head between Ricky and Brenda, and when things were really put into motion on August 31st, 2015, when Ricky reached out to Brenda and was like, listen, I have a new girlfriend. As you know, things are going well. Things are getting pretty serious, so I need us, you and I, to have a more substantial split. I need you to come to my place and get the rest of your stuff. I'm going to take you off my phone plan. We need this to just be more separate. And that was just 2 days before Kendra was murdered. Luis also testified against Brenda at her trial, and he did not make her look good. He said that, yeah, they had gone out to dinner. That was true, but that he had loaned his Jeep to Brenda, not Crystal, and that when he had first seen his vehicle on the news, he had actually called Brenda prior to calling police. And when he spoke to her that day, she asked him to help her cover up for a crime. She said not to do anything, to hide it, to not tell anybody what happened, not tell anybody what he had seen, and that she would pay for him to get a new paint job on his Jeep to hide that it was the black Jeep used in the crime. And he was just kind of like, no, I won't be doing that, and called the police instead. It also came out at trial that Brenda had reached out to others about getting a gun or finding someone that she could hire to, quote, hurt someone. She had even tried to hire her own cousin to attack Kendra with a baseball bat. She had also told her friend that she wanted Ricky to be beaten into a coma with the bat and Kendra to be killed. She told so many people what she was planning and had tried to get so many people to help her commit this crime, yet no one called the police. No one did anything. And if they had, Kendra may be alive today. This is that see something, say something. This is when you should have said something. It's none of these people's fault directly, but like you should say something. If your friend's telling you that they're trying to find somebody to murder their ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend, tell somebody. Just tell somebody, man. Come on. Talk to your friend. Tell them they're being a dumb bitch, but also tell somebody. Then Crystal Cortez took the stand, and she had made a deal with the prosecution that the death penalty would be taken off the table if she testified in court against Brenda and told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Otherwise, the deal would be off. She told she told the court at that point that this was always intended to be a hit against Kendra. It wasn't supposed to be a robbery gone wrong. She had hired them to murder Kendra because she was so jealous of Ricky's new relationship. And she even told the court of all the different ways that she and Brenda had sat down together and had planned to commit this murder. She said of the different ways that they had considered killing Kendra, and I quote, "One was to inject her with heroin. Another was to inject her with a sedative. And the other was to kill her with a gun." Initially, Crystal had actually agreed to be the triggerman, to be the person to actually go out and murder Kendra. But after the two sat and talked for a while, they realized that they needed somebody else to do the dirty work. Crystal said of this, quote, "She asked me if I knew someone could do it because I came from a rundown neighborhood." Within no time, Christopher Love had fallen into their lap. They had been over at Crystal's mother's house when they ran into him. He had been there with his kids. They were playing, and they had sort of taken him aside and been like, "So, question. Do you personally, or do you know anybody that kills people?" And he was like, "Oh my God, so funny you asked. I actually do murder people. That's something that is on my resume." And they were like, "Great, let's do business." While things were in motion, Crystal and Brenda had been stalking Kendra. They had been following her around to learn her routine, to learn different ways to get into her parking garage. They had been watching her through night vision binoculars. They had even attempted to get a silencer for the gun that Christopher Love had bought to actually commit the murder, but they decided against it. And it was while during all their recon that Brenda had sort of been pushed into a corner. She had gone through Ricky's phone, and she had seen that Kendra and Ricky were about to go away for the Labor Day weekend, and that once they got back, they were going to be going to visit Kendra's family so that Ricky could meet them for the first time because they were getting so serious. So she felt like she was out of time, and now was the time to do it. They then set their plan in motion. They headed to Luis's shop so that they could drop off their car and get the Jeep. Crystal agreed to drive that day because Christopher wasn't very familiar with Dallas, and she was. The two then, Christopher and Crystal, then drove and dropped Brenda off at a library so that she could use studying for school as part of her alibi, and she could be seen there. And then they headed to Kendra's work to wait for her to get off for that day. Once she got off, they started to follow her home, but they lost her on the way. So Brenda, knowing the area, not Brenda, Crystal, knowing the area well, drove real fast in another route and ended up getting to the apartment complex before Kendra did. She waited, she pulled in, and Christopher hid in the back of the Jeep and waited for Kendra to come home. Once Kendra arrived, Christopher got out of the car, he went over and he murdered Kendra, and then he got back in and they left. They went straight back to Luis's garage where they met up with Brenda, and they are seen on surveillance there looking at Kendra's stolen purse. And the footage is really grainy, it's hard to see, so Crystal had to point out to the court who was who in the video. The next day, Brenda paid off Christopher with a combination of cash and cocaine, and then she gave Crystal a whopping $500 for her part in the crime. Crystal is a crazy person, I guess, just like off her rocker, and she took the money and made it into a shape of a heart and then took a photo of it, which they found that she had like posted online, and then she took a selfie with her good friend Brenda because they are gross. Brenda was asked why she would take such a small amount of money to do something so fucking terrible, and she said, quote, "I was broke. I have a son to support." Brenda's defense did the best that they could to try to get her a non-guilty verdict, and I think they did a good job because they just basically said, like, your only evidence against our client is the testimony of a convicted murderer, Christopher Love, and an admitted liar, Crystal Cortez. This woman has lied every step of the way. She lied every time you asked her any questions. She lied. She just lies, and she is lying now to get a deal. And the only evidence you have that ties my client to this crime is from these two people who are not credible witnesses at all. They said that it was just Crystal and Christopher who wanted to commit this crime, that they were intending to simply rob Kendra, and that it was a robbery gone wrong, and that it was just them. And that any connection that Brenda had to these two was just a coincidence, and Brenda Delgado did not testify at her trial. The jury was sent to deliberate, and after less than 20 minutes, they came back with a verdict. Isn't that insane? I don't think I've ever heard of that happening. And on a circumstantial case, albeit a strong circumstantial case, but just a circumstantial case, in less than 20 minutes, they came back with a verdict. And as the verdict was read, Kendra's family stood and held each other and braced themselves for whatever they were about to hear. Quote, "We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment. Brenda Delgado was given the maximum allowable sentence with the death penalty being taken off the table, and that was life in prison without the possibility of parole." Kendra's mother said to Brenda Delgado in her victim impact statement, a pretty powerful statement, and that was, and I quote, "You, Brenda Delgado, have earned your spot on this earth behind cold steel bars for the rest of your miserable, pathetic life. And if justice could have handed you a death sentence, make no mistake, I would have been there, front and center." Crystal Cortez was given a sentence of 35 years for her involvement in the crime, and she would be eligible for parole after serving just half of her sentence. And Kendra's brother Neil said to Crystal in his victim impact statement, and I quote, "I think what you did was incredibly stupid. I do want to tell you that I appreciate your testimony. I can't say I forgive you, but maybe over time it's something that I could do." Brenda Delgado did already, even though this just happened, this was like, a little over 2 years ago, Brenda did already try to appeal her conviction, bringing up 11 different points in her appeal where she thought that she deserved a second chance, but the Dallas upheld her conviction. So I now want to wrap up this video and end it with a quote from Kendra's mother, Bonnie, to Brenda Delgado about her daughter, Kendra Hatcher. And she said, and I quote, "Brenda Delgado, justice has been served for the people whose lives were touched in one way or another by this incredible, amazing woman, which I was honored to be, Kendra Hatcher's mother. You, Brenda Delgado, are the root of all evil. You and the other two pathetic lives you had join you on your path of destruction. In the little bit of time I've learned about you these past 5 days, you could never have measured up to be the woman that my daughter, Kendra Hatcher, was." And with that quote, that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Kendra Hatcher. Isn't that just so messed up, dude? It breaks my heart. Kendra seemed like she was just such an awesome person who was killed for literally no reason. Like, no one had a bad thing to say about her at all, and she was so selfless in everything she did. She was like all about the kids. She just sounds like such a good person, and she got wrapped up in something that's so stupid, man, to kill somebody for that reason. Like, her and Ricky, though it was getting serious, they had just started dating, and I'm not trying to like downplay their relationship because it does seem like they loved each other, but it's like she was murdered over a guy that she'd known for 4 months. She was literally murdered over a brand new boyfriend, and the fact that this Brenda could get so jealous that she would have somebody murdered for a guy is just beyond me. It like blows my mind when people do things like that. There are so many people out there. There are so many people out there. Don't kill people. Just don't kill people. There you go. And on this day of love, happy Valentine's Day, don't kill people. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the details you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for taking the time to remember Kendra with me today. She was a serious loss to all of those who loved her. To listen to her mother talk, to watch her mother and see her face when she's testifying against, not testifying against, when she's talking about her daughter, will rip your heart into a million pieces. You can feel this woman's pain. And it's just very clear that she was incredibly loved, and that her absence is very heavy and present on all of those who cared about her. And I can't even imagine what that's like. And that's so messed up. Anyways, please let me know down below of any cases you would like to see me cover in the future. As you know, I have a long list of cases, but whenever you leave me a suggestion, I love to look into them because you guys have really good taste in cases. And if I do cover a case that you've recommended, I will give you a shout out because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week. Usually it's a morbid makeup video. This week, because of the length of this video and just like the weight of this child inside me, I did not do the morbid makeup format this time. You may have noticed that and been like, why isn't she putting on makeup? Because I am very pregnant. He's gonna be here in no time. And I just didn't do it today, I'm sorry. And I told you guys in that one video that this might happen from time to time, especially with really long videos, and that's where we are. But please subscribe and ring the bell so we can hang out more often. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my other social media is linked down below. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook page, and a Facebook group. And a link to my merch store if you want to get this design or any of the other designs that I have. Just keep in mind this pink one is only here until the end of February, but you can get it in black and white for the foreseeable future. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe. I hope you have a good Valentine's Day and be a better person than you were yesterday. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.